By the time anyone on the ground understood what was happening, it was already over. A modern passenger jet had just obeyed a machine instead of the humans flying it, and lost. In 13 minutes, an aircraft vanished into the Java Sea, taking 189 people with it. 5 months later, the same thing happened again. Another dive. Another crew fighting controls that refused to listen. Another 157 lives erased. These weren't weather accidents. They weren't pilot mistakes. They were the consequences of a decision made years earlier, far from any cockpit, in rooms where spreadsheets mattered more than physics. And that's the uncomfortable truth most people never say out loud. Disasters like this don't begin with explosions. They begin with meetings. They begin with reasonable arguments, calm voices, and decisions that look efficient on paper. If you believe failures are usually caused by one bad moment, this story won't sit comfortably with you. Because what happened here wasn't sudden. It was slow, rational, and approved step by step. This story is for people who understand that systems fail long before headlines appear, and that the most dangerous decisions rarely look dangerous at the time. This isn't about attacking pilots. It isn't about blaming engineers. And it isn't about pretending accidents are simple. This is about tracing responsibility carefully back to the moment when safety stopped being the highest authority. By the end of this story, you'll understand how one of the most trusted engineering cultures in history slowly traded certainty for speed, and why the consequences didn't arrive as warnings, but as funerals. Because the real question isn't how a plane failed. It's how an organization built on fear of failure slowly lost the ability to say no. For most of the 20th century, Boeing wasn't just a manufacturer. It was an engineering institution. Its identity was built on a single obsession: never make a mistake at 35,000 feet. Engineers had authority. Schedules bent to safety. Designs were rejected over millimeters. Arguments lasted months. And no was a respected answer. When Boeing built airplanes, it didn't chase quarterly results. It chased certainty. Because everyone inside the company understood a brutal truth: airplanes do not forgive compromise. That culture produced legends: the 707, the 727, the 737, the 747. These weren't rushed products. They were slow, methodical achievements shaped by internal resistance, endless testing, and fear of failure. Safety wasn't branding. It was belief. And then, quietly, that belief began to erode. The shift didn't start with a crash. It started with a merger. In 1997, Boeing merged with McDonnell Douglas. On paper, Boeing was the buyer. In reality, something else happened. McDonnell Douglas executives brought with them a different survival philosophy, one forged in shrinking defense budgets and shareholder pressure. Cost-cutting wasn't a tactic. It was culture. Engineers became overhead. Speed became a virtue. Wall Street approval mattered more than technical dissent. When Harry Stonecipher, a former McDonnell Douglas executive, became CEO, he summarized the transformation in a sentence that barely made headlines: "We're not an engineering company anymore. We're a business." It didn't sound dangerous, but it rewired the company. Decision-making shifted away from engineers and toward financial managers. Schedules hardened. Budgets became immovable. Safety margins were reframed as acceptable risk. Engineers who raised concerns found themselves ignored, overruled, or quietly sidelined. Boeing still spoke publicly about safety, but internally, a new language dominated: efficiency, shareholder value, return on investment. Then came the pressure Boeing couldn't ignore. In 2010, Airbus launched the A320neo. It was more fuel-efficient, cheaper to operate, and instantly attractive to airlines. Orders flooded in. Boeing suddenly faced a crisis of relevance. Its true next-generation aircraft would take a decade to build and billions to certify. Wall Street didn't want patience. Airlines didn't want to wait. So Boeing made a defining choice. Instead of building a new airplane, it decided to stretch an old one. The 737 was designed in the 1960s. Its low ground clearance made it fundamentally incompatible with larger, modern engines. Redesigning the aircraft would have meant time, cost, and extensive pilot retraining. So Boeing forced the engines onto the legacy frame anyway. That decision changed the aerodynamics. Under certain conditions, the aircraft had a tendency to pitch upward, something no commercial jet should ever do. The engineering solution was obvious: redesign the airframe or train pilots extensively. The business solution was faster: hide the problem in software. That software was called MCOS. MCOS, the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, was designed to automatically push the nose of the aircraft downward when a sensor detected a steep angle of attack. Officially, it was meant to make the plane feel like older 737 models. Unofficially, it allowed Boeing to avoid simulator training and sell the aircraft as just another minor upgrade. But MCOS had a fatal flaw. It relied on a single sensor. If that sensor failed, MCOS could repeatedly force the plane into a dive, overriding pilot commands. Engineers knew this. Internal discussions raised concerns about redundancy, pilot awareness, and system authority. Fixing those problems would have required redesigns, delays, and higher costs. So the warnings became inconvenient. And then they disappeared. Pilots weren't told about MCOS. Manuals barely mentioned it. Training was reduced to a tablet lesson. Software was given authority over human judgment, not because it was safer, but because it was faster to certify. This was no longer engineering logic. This was financial logic, moving at cruising speed. When Lion Air Flight 610 crashed, Boeing didn't immediately ground the aircraft. It pointed to maintenance issues and pilot error. Internally, engineers suspected MCOS. But grounding the plane would have meant billions in losses, lawsuits, and public scrutiny. So Boeing delayed. It defended. It minimized. 5 months later, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 crashed under nearly identical conditions. This time, denial collapsed. Countries grounded the aircraft one by one. China acted first. Europe followed. The United States waited last. Oversight had been outsourced. Trust had replaced verification. The system that was supposed to protect passengers had been hollowed out from the inside. When the 737 MAX was finally grounded worldwide, the damage was undeniable. Orders vanished. Production stopped. Compensation claims exploded. Whistleblowers came forward. Internal emails surfaced. Employees mocking regulators, admitting fear of the aircraft, and confessing they wouldn't let their own families fly on it. The myth of Boeing perfection shattered. And the story didn't end there. Quality issues continued. Loose bolts, missing components, manufacturing defects. In 2024, a door plug blew out mid-flight on a 737 MAX 9, exposing passengers to open air at cruising altitude. No one died, but only by chance. Once again, production stopped. Once again, trust eroded. Because culture doesn't fail once. It fails repeatedly until it's rebuilt or replaced. Boeing never lost its engineers. It lost their authority. It lost the ability for someone to say no and stop the machine. What replaced it was a system where timelines mattered more than tolerances, earnings calls mattered more than physics, and speed mattered more than certainty. Airplanes don't care about stock prices. They don't respond to apologies. They obey physics. And physics is unforgiving. Boeing forgot that. And when a company forgets its founding truth, the reminder doesn't come gently. It arrives in black boxes, ocean floors, lawsuits, and lost trust. Today, Boeing promises reform. Executives speak of safety. Regulators promise oversight. But the lesson remains permanent. When profits replace engineers, failure isn't a possibility, it's a countdown. Because at 35,000 feet, there are no financial shortcuts. And the sky always remembers who respected it and who didn't.